Well, you're wondering where I am. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Let me know if you are able to hear me out there. I'm going to turn up on this end. Okay, so let me know if you're able to hear me and everything is good in the chat, and I will. Oh, Peggy, I'm so glad that you're here. Actually, there we go. Yes, people say yes. Okay, very good. Well, yes, Jason, I and all you other folks, we were talking about poodles, and I am in Seattle or Seattle area, and this is Bo. He is my buddy, and he is one of my housemates when I am staying here in Seattle. So I just thought you might like to say hello, and I knew he would like to say hello. So there, you've been on TV, you're famous. Okay, we're gonna let him go now, but he just got back from the groomer. So I figured it was a good day to show him because he's actually one of those dogs who really loves to go play in the mud. And so he's not usually that clean. But Anyhow, it is great to have you all here. I see Fossil Forward Finds and Critter Girl, and I see Elderly Poodle and Mary Jo Schrader. I thought it'd be interesting to highlight her comment. Uh, Apparently, you guys were talking about where you sell and that kind of thing. And I like this where you theme a booth. I had a kitchen booth for a long time. It did really well. And it was really cohesive and easy to merchandise because everything that went in it was the same thing. And I like random and odd, just like a lot of us. I think a lot of us in this business are iconoclasts and we like things that are different. Otherwise, we just buy the same old boring stuff that everybody else does. So, do you all have booths? That's a good question. I know some of our folks here are collectors and they are in it for that, which is great because those of us who have booths and resell only get to exist because some people are collectors and most of us start as collectors too. Don Curtis, it's nice to have you here tonight. Um, I think Bo was considerably less expensive than $150,000, but it is amazing. Yes, people spend money where their passions are. That's part of why we get to do what we do in this business. And boy, yes, I've heard some really big numbers on certain types of dogs now. Oodalolly Shop, hello. I'm so glad to have you here with us. I really enjoy the just the energy and interest that all of you have in this. Corey Ramsey's here from Long Beach. Um, let's see who else we have here. Hedron is here with us from the Miranda Files. Nice to see you. Beth Kemper, I'm hopeful that you will have a great show this weekend. I think you will. Um, and Carol Sue Pope, we are back, yes. And Les, hello again. Nice to have you here from Portland. The intro makes my hips ache, yes. Um, and yes, she never falls off. I remember that cartoon from when I was a kid, but I haven't seen that one. They had a marathon last night and it wasn't there. And here we are. Yes, Susan, hello there. And Jason and Peggy Ferguson, it's really good to see you. I'm glad that you're getting a good cell signal out there. I know you're out in the country there in Kentucky, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Jason asked the spelling. Bo actually, his mistress spells it B-E-A-U. So not like Bo Duke, but like a bow. Let's see here. Who else do we have? Miss Wildlife, great to have you here. A couple of you folks had suggestions for some topics tonight. We are going to cover all of them and some other things as well. Corinne Jones, wonderful to have you here. She has a booth and she also sells at shows with me in Spokane. And I don't, but I would like to when I retire in 2 years. You know, that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people get into the reselling and that sort of thing. It's a fun thing to do in retirement. You get some extra pin money. So you're not just living off of your retirement income, and it also is a great way to socialize. And having a booth is a lot of fun. The video I did tonight, of course, was on merchandising, and I think merchandising is really a great fun thing to do. So, so how are you all doing? Have you found anything for your? Yep, she's been doing the 2 shows at Tea Stock with us every year, and that's been really fun. And they have, and yes, you already have stock. Yes, I imagine so. We all have a bit of stock. We're going to talk a little bit about stock and what's stock when we get a little later in this. Have you folks found anything for your own collections lately? Tell us in the chat what your latest fun finds are. And are you seeing more stuff? Are you seeing different stuff? Is it changing now that we're getting into a different season? I imagine some people are doing seasonal displays. We don't see as much of that in the summertime because it's not really appropriate for the summertime. There's not that many seasons. It's summer. But in fall, we get fall decorating, we get Halloween, we get people starting in with Christmas displays. So curious about that. The other thing I'll talk real briefly, speaking of shows. So I did a show with Corinne and Miss Wildlife in Spokane, and we were very busy. It was not as busy as last year in terms of dollar volume, but it was interesting how the first wave of customers through bought less expensive items, and when it was really busy, we were selling a ton of little stuff. And then when it got slower, The serious customers came around. It's about a 75 or 100 dealer show. So then the serious people came around and made a second circle, and then we started selling more expensive things. And I thought that was an interesting trend. That's something I see at smaller shows or where shows are in multiple buildings. Um, so, Beth, I'll be curious to see if that's the case for you this weekend. But we actually sold the better stuff later in the show and made more money later in the show, even though the big crowds and the big volume sales were at the beginning of the show. I think we sold something like 150 items in Spokane and 125 in Portland. So that was pretty exciting. Susan found a green Viking bonbon for your collection. Oh, that's great. I know you love the Viking glass. I always have too. I feel like I was ahead of that curve, but now everybody loves it, so I should have bought more when I had the chance. Um, Other things too, the other trends that I think we saw, we didn't sell as much mid-century glass in Spokane as we had before. We did sell it in Portland. Spokane, definitely a more mixed market in terms of urban and rural, although Portland we sell both as well. But I think the show is more focused on the modernism in Portland, and maybe that had something to do with it. Um, Oh, you got a glass eye. Oh, the sea urchins are really neat. They look like actual sea urchins. I wish I could show you. My friend who I stay with here, um, I rent a room here, and she has a glass table that is all glass critters in it. So it's glass top, and it's all like this is her kitchen, like the dining room table, and it's got a glass top, and you take it off, and she's got shells and sand in the bottom, and then all these glass sea life things, so it looks like the floor of the ocean. It's such a neat thing. I honestly don't think anything I collect, I don't collect anything I buy. Ah, that's interesting. This is something that I have noticed, and I've heard dealers say this before. If I collect it, I keep it. And if it's not the thing I collect, then that's what I sell. And for some people, that makes a lot of sense because you become attached to things and you want to build your collection. I do a little bit of both because at this point I have so many things in some of my collections that when I'm finding things, they're mostly duplicates, so those I will sell. Also, interesting that you mentioned usually if it's damaged somehow, it becomes mine. And I have noticed when we have done estate sales for dealers who are retiring or moving to assisted living, we had one who I'd known for years and she was 95 and went to live with her children. And we sold the stuff in her house and it all looked beautiful. And everything had damage because she would put the non-damaged stuff into the store and sell it, and she would keep the damaged stuff because she figured it didn't have a lot of value. And turned out she was right. I want a picture of that. Yes, I'll try to do that. That's a good idea. I'm really enjoying the Fenton Feather Pull. I am so glad. That was such a great piece Corey just was able to get from me. I will be doing a what sold video very soon and the next level 2 and level 3 offering for auction coming up pretty quickly here, so watch for that. I'm still finding good deals on pottery and vintage linen, but shipping seems to be getting more expensive. Is that related to the economy? Well, it's related to a couple of things. They already are charging the differentials for the holiday shipping. They've already implemented that at some of the shipping services and on certain things. Oh, okay. Zeno says, "Hi, Zeno. Thank you very much for your help getting ready for this. I'm going to turn up the mic just a little bit," he says. So if it gets to be too blasting, let me know, but it looks like it's not going into the yellow or red. Um, so it was set for the mic here. I see. Okay. There we go. That should be better. Yeah, now I'm getting up into the yellow. I think we'll be okay there. And let me know if it's not. Um, I think the shipping, that's part of it. Also, I think that, to be honest with you, I hate to say this, but it is also part with the politics right now. There's just been a lot of, we're close to an election. We're definitely seeing some effect on sales, particularly if you live in one of the swing states, because all of the advertising is just about politics. There's not any other stuff coming out. And of course, there's a lot of concern about mailing of votes and things. And um, I know that first class mailing rates were raised just a few months ago again for like the third or fourth time in the year. So it's just the nature of things. And that does affect things online because the total price is the price with shipping. I just had someone buy a Fenton lamp for $500, and she was horrified because the insurance quote or the shipping quote was $170. Well, we were able to take it and split it into two packages. She's gotten one. Hopefully the other arrives tomorrow. So we put the shade in one package and the base in another package. And by not shipping them together, the size went down to a point where the shipping was roughly half the price of what was quoted on the larger box. So we're having to be a little more creative with shipping these days as well. And much better. Okay, thank you, Zeno. Very much appreciate it. And yes, we will have fun tonight. And yes, it has been over the last 4 to 6 weeks or so. It will get better after the new year, but they do charge more this time of year because they can, and there is more demand. So, you know, that's they're allegedly losing money. I have a cousin who has worked at the post office for years, and he says that they are required to pre-fund their retirement pensions for the next 75 years. They're funding pensions for people who have not even been born yet, who will work at the post office someday. And the reason for that is because then Congress can go and take that money and borrow it and use it for other things. So that's part of the reason they're showing major deficits, and that's part of the reason they're raising the rates. So when I say politics, well, unfortunately, politics play into it. What I find very odd is that I will put in a shipping quote on Pirate Ship, which, by the way, if you're shipping and you don't know about Pirate Ship, do definitely check it out. You will save money. And when you go into Pirate Ship, I'll put something under USPS, and it'll say, oh, it's 30 cents less if you use UPS. And then when you print the label, UPS is shipping it through USPS for 30 cents less. I don't really know why we're subsidizing UPS through our tax-driven postal system. So there's some things that, you know, a few questions to ask if you run into anyone who can answer those things. This is also true. Some prices did go down. It depends what you're sending. Books and DVDs have been shipping cheaper on Ground Advantage as opposed to Media Mail. I have a friend who ships a lot of books. In fact, starting in November, December, and January, I'm going to be selling a number of books on my monthly. We're going to have a little book club for a few months because I'm going to be traveling and I need to have him ship things that are easy enough for him to deal with while I'm gone, because I'm going to we're going to be still doing our postings for the level 2 and level 3 bonus videos, but we're going to be selling some things like that. And he informed me that that is the case as well. So, and no, that doesn't mean much better, just a little better. And yes, Pirate Ship is great. It really is. I only buy my labels through Pirate Ship and I get points on my credit card. Yeah, that's very, very smart. And yes, Don, I think you'll especially like it because I'm going to sell several mysteries out of my mother's book collection. So we'll have some fun with that. As far as the real world selling, well, it was summer. My malls did really well if they were in tourist locations. And by location in Seattle, which was a little bit more of a local market, it didn't do as well. And that's a typical run for them. Every location has a different, they call it the skew in retail, which is, you know, what percentage of your overall sales are made each month. In a tourist location, summer is going to be a really good time for you. In a more local location, your best time might be holidays through February or March when people are staying closer to home. And so we definitely saw that trend kick through. Can sellers have a contract with shippers? So unless you're a really, really big seller, you probably aren't going to get a discount, but that's where Pirate Ship comes in because they aggregate and they do get us the discount. So that's why a lot of us use them. Shippo is another one. Yes, Shippo is the one that I believe Whatnot introduced a lot of people to, and Shippo also is an aggregator and is able to get better rates as well. So that is a place to try. That's a very good point. Honestly, in the real world locations, the biggest correlation to sales success is in the malls I'm in that give good service and are involved with the customers, and the people who work there are interested in what you bring and check out your booth after you leave or ask questions while you're there. Those are the ones where I sell the best. And the ones where it's just sort of self-service and the customer is left to themselves, well, I usually eventually get out of those malls because I just don't do well there. Um, as far as online, and this is true, shows and everything too, online, again, summer is usually the slowest time, but it is picking up. And honestly, I had good online sales because I stuck to the most unique things I could buy, and I tried to find things that were not things everybody else was selling. And that is the clue. You can sell a lot that looks like everybody else's stuff when the sales are high, like at holiday gift buying time. Sure, maybe you can sell 10 Penguin hot cold ice bucket keepers because they're cool and they're great for New Year's and they're a neat look and they're a fun thing to give as a present. But 10 of them in July, well, we know they're plentiful. They're going to sit there for a while. Um, well, I'm definitely interested, that's for sure. Do I find booths across the country sell out faster and are harder to restock? That is a problem, I have to admit. I've been narrowing the number of booths I have that are away. I'm really wanting to get down to where I have one or two in each location that I go because it is hard to restock. It's hard for the mall when I'm not there to bring fresh merchandise and things get stale. It's also hard for me. Fortunately, I've had really good fortune. The malls I'm in are primarily run by people who are very professional. A lot of the people who sell there are professional dealers, and so they're used to things like if I send a box and it's priced, they can put it out for me, and that really helps because otherwise, it really is easy for things. After 2 or 3 months, if a regular customer comes about every 2 or 3 months, which is typical in the antique business, well, then they've seen it. So that is an issue. Ah, yes. See, here you go. Selling for the season. Pom Pom 4-foot tree for 200. Absolutely the right price, and she got what she should have for it. Jewelry online auctions are doing well right now. I am not surprised about that. Costume jewelry is very popular, and actually jewelry in general. And there's a whole lot of different things. Oh, yes, your friend in Missouri. I almost ran into her friend in Missouri at an auction in Missouri, and we just missed each other. We may have even been there at the same time and didn't recognize each other. So at some point we'll get to meet. Is there a guide on? Yes, there is actually, and we're going to talk about that because one of the topics that was suggested tonight, and I think we can get into that, was um, how do you research? There were 3 topics suggested by you folks tonight, and I'm going to talk a little bit about all of them. And oh, that's great. Yes, I was with Willie Joe and Beth Kemper and the Wrinkles at Springfield. And Willie Joe, they had 3 Halloween costumes and they sold all of them. And they were full size, like adult size. Um, and yes, here we go. So, yes, I'm glad that I got you started on that because it's a fun area. So the first topic this one was suggested by Miss Wildlife, and this was, what are the top, it's going to be a little more than she asked. She asked, what are the top 3 references you go to when researching an item that has no marks? So while I'm talking on my end, you folks in the chat, if you have ideas for places you go that are good for researching things that have no marks or are hidden or obscure, please pop them into the chat because it all helps each other. But the first thing I would say, the thing, and this is Zeno's doing, he introduced me to this. I have not been the biggest fan of Google Lens because when I put things in Google Lens, I think it's great if you're putting in things that are relatively well known and that maybe you just haven't seen before and you're getting into the business or a category you haven't seen before and they're out there. But what I found with Google Lens is I'll put something obscure in and it brings up 100 things that have one element of the item, but they don't really match. And it isn't as helpful as I think it could be. Zeno has introduced me to ChatGPT. You put, what is this? And drop a picture in and hit the button. And they will couch it in terms like it seems to be, it appears to be, which is your clue that you need to do more research. But like we put in a piece that I'll show you here. Well, actually, I think I can show you now. Let's go to overlays here. Let me find this one for you. So we put this in, and it was able to read that little label. I knew what this was because it's one of my favorite pieces. It's actually a piece I have in my collection. And it said, oh, we believe this is Viking glass, and we believe it's the blue neat color, and it's probably part of the Epic line. And they gave all these clues. Yeah, it turned out, yes, that was exactly what it was. But it was able to give a whole lot of detail and hints that you could use to do more research. So I really thought that ChatGPT was really good. Google Lens definitely is good with translating of text because the Google Translator is really good. So that's a useful tool as well. Um, Real quickly here, enameling and other forms of decorative methods. You know, I'm going to probably have to show that to you with examples. So please send an email for next month's chat and I'll try to get to that because I think I can show you that, but I can't really show you it without having examples here. Um, in my circle, Google Lenses first, then we go to reference books. Yes, let's talk about reference books. So how do you find things that are not in the, how do you find things that are not in your wheelhouse or that you haven't seen before that are unmarked? Well, old reference books can be awesome for that because, for example, and here's one that's perfect because it even says right on it, unmarked, Unsigned Beauties of Costume Jewelry. Now, this was put out in 2005. A friend of mine has this book, and yes, the values have changed, but all the identification and all the information is still there, and it shows things like here's the back of the piece, and here's how you can tell a piece that was made for Judy Lee because they use these kind of rivets. Here's how you can tell a hook that goes for a Shriner pin as opposed to a Warner pin. The Shriner pin might be 3 or 4 more times as valuable. Here's how you can determine a Juliana bracelet because it has 5 ovals on the back, and that's how they constructed it. And so reference books are great for certain types of things. Some things you could buy a reference book or you can actually go to a website. Blanco has now posted all of their old catalogs on blanco.com. So you can go to Blanco directly and you can look up a piece and go through their catalogs, and it'll take you a little while until you get used to what's where and you've memorized it like I have, and there it will pop up. Now Hedron says Google Google Lens is getting better all the time and can throw up new results if you wait some weeks. And that's true. Sometimes you just keep doing it until it gets to the right thing. I like Chat GPT because, interesting for your descriptions for Avon. Definitely, yes, old reference books are good. And that is absolutely, but I definitely am liking Chat GPT because when I put a picture in Google Lens, it'll say, well, I'll show you another example actually, because I did a side-by-side comparison with Zeno here just a little bit ago. Let me see if I can get to that. Yes, here we go. So somebody asked, what are things that I collect that I really prize? I really love Don Blanding illustrations. This is a Don Blanding illustration, and I knew it because I also collect Don Blanding books, and this is where a lot of the illustrations came from. But when you put this in Google Lens, it just says, oh, it's Art Nouveau, and it looks like a lot of other artists, and we don't really know, and it could be, it's similar to Gustav Klimt and Alphonse Mucha and all of the regular names. Well, no, it's Don Blanding. When I put this in Chat GPS, it knew right away that it was Don Blanding, and it suggested things about him and where you could find more information. So it's a useful tool. They're both useful in their own way, but those are definitely places you can go to find information. Also true. Thankfully, we're not dealing with anything where somebody is going to have a bad one if what we're telling them isn't right. This is great information too. Yes, Thrift Books is a great place to find older reference books on particular subjects. But there's also some other ways you can do, and let's get to them. Collector groups can be really, really useful. This is the Early American Pattern Glass Society. The Early American Pattern Glass books are really cumbersome to use. This is not the easiest pattern glass index either, but it's much more organized because there's so many different kinds of pattern glass that were done over the years by so many different companies. And they break it down into, okay, does it have berries on it? Does it have stars on it? Does it have a comet on it? And then it breaks it down into the different possibilities. And there still might be 50 or 100, but you can look through. You have a much better chance of finding things, and it is faster than a book. So I am liking this site. Another site that I'm using is Spruce Crafts. Actually is pretty good for certain types of things. They have a lot of, it's fairly short and brief information, but it's a good place to start for certain types of identification. And it's all sorts of different things, lots of different categories, as opposed to just vintage costume jewelry or one thing. Collector groups, absolutely. Fossil Forward Vine says he's meaning to sign up for the local postcard group. It's great when it's local because you get to meet. I just spoke in front of the Green River Glass Club. I'll have to show you a video of that pretty soon. It was fun. Another place that's good to look is the Marks Project. Now, the question was about unmarked items, but the Marks Project is great because it helps you with marks, because a lot of marks can be really obscure. They happen to have a section now on studio pottery of the 20th and 21st century. We have a lot of interest in studio pottery. There were a million studio potters, especially here in the Northwest. There were literally thousands of people doing this at one time. Some of those signatures are easy to read and some of them are almost impossible. Some of them, it's just pretty and it's nice, and you'll see Laura Caldwell pick stuff up and she's styling with it and it looks great. Sometimes she's got information on the person and sometimes it's just a nice piece of pottery. But this is a place where sometimes you can find information on that piece of pottery. Hello there, Sarah. It's great to see you. Learned a lot by handling items and shopping at antique stores. Yes, that is a good reference. That is a really good, being there shows. That's why I'm always encouraging people to go to the shows and pick things up and handle them. Bibliobooks is good for buying older books. That's great. Miss Wildlife was a librarian, so she is she knows the sources. And cool. I'm so glad. I think this is great info too, and I'm so glad that people ask questions. And I encourage you, every time we're going to have a level 3 chat, which is every month, even if it's the middle of the month, and you just think of something, send me an email and say, hey, I'm curious about this. And I can't promise I can get to them all, but it really does help me understand what I can do to help you, and vice versa. Picking up and handling at thrift stores, absolutely. Let's see, another place that you can go is, this I thought was interesting. This is an outfit called, I'm going to have to find their name here. Oh shoot, where are you? It is called Peony. Darn, I thought I wrote that down. Well, I'm afraid you'll just have to look this one up online. I think it's Peony Plates or something. But the idea behind this particular place is that this is a place where they show a lot of old plates with marks, and they have extensive information. There's a whole lot of plates and things that were made in Staffordshire in the Victorian period, and they might say the pattern name, but they don't say who made them. Or they might say who made them, but not the pattern name. And they give hints like if the ink stamp is in blue, it's probably after 1850 or before 1850, but if it's another color, then it probably dates after that. And there's a lot of good things that can help you narrow things down. So that was useful. Of course, we talked about Google Lens. There's also a site here I think is really good. It's called 20thCenturyGlassCollectors.com. But it's not just 20th century glass. This particular one at the bottom, this is English glass. This is a screenshot from their page. And they're showing various companies that we know, some of which are signed, like most Wedgwood's glass is signed. Whitefriars usually is. Stevens and Williams, not necessarily. But they also show down here this registry mark. That's from the Victorian period. That's so that you can identify the date. If you know how to read those and they have a good description of how to do that, you can find the exact day that a piece of glass was made during the late 1800s when they required those marks on English glass, which can help narrow things down. And well, thank you all for saying this. And I will show you one thing, because this was another thing that came to me, and I feel really dumb for not knowing this. So I'm going to show you. Zeno had to tell me about this. Okay, here's my website. See, whoops. See this little, if you see below my picture in the circle, home videos, live playlist, community membership store, and look, there's a little magnifying glass. Turns out if you hit the little magnifying glass and you put in the word Blanco, all of my videos that say Blanco in the description are going to pop up. So if there's something you saw in a video I did a long time ago, or if you weren't involved with the channel back when I started 500 videos ago, and you're like, I wonder if he ever talked about this, the chances are you might be able to find it something that you heard me talk about through my through the Antique Nomad, and you also may be able, depending, some of the episodes they actually have transcript ability, and you might even be able to find something more specific. But this is part of the reason why I write a description for each video and try to mention at least a few of the highlights, because this makes it a searchable thing that you can go back to. So this is something that I think I just learned that I'm going to use on my site and other sites. So we learn something all the time, even when we're supposed to be the expert. Corey says he goes to Long Beach Antique Mall and looks to learn about and hold pieces. And so the people with the case keys probably dread my arrival, but you know what? That's great. I'm so glad you're not afraid to look in showcases. And it's okay to take their time. They're there because they enjoy doing this. They like antiques too. Most people who work in an antique store are there because this is their bag also. And so they would rather be sharing information and having fun with you than sweeping the floor or sitting behind the desk playing on their phone, at least if they're there to do what they're there to do. So um, yeah, and other YouTube channels are searchable in the same manner. So if there's a YouTube channel and you're like, oh, I remember I saw something on there, or they give really good information, I wonder how I can find it, that's how you can search it again. So um, the second question that came was, in the wintertime, do your thrifting places and items you're looking for change? And I love that question. I'm going to throw it back to all of you. Are you looking in different places now that it's indoor season and maybe we're not having outdoor flea markets, or maybe you live in a northern place where it's getting cold already and garage sales are over? Where are you going? How does it shift for you in the wintertime? I'm going to tell, oh, yes, the shirt. Thank you. Yes, we'll talk about the shirt in a minute. Um, I definitely look in different places because I travel in different places. One of the reasons I go to Florida in the winter isn't just because I can sell in Florida in the winter, it's because I can buy in Florida in the winter. Snowbirds come down and they bring things. Sometimes families, if they have an estate situation where someone passes or moves into assisted living in the fall, they'll wait till winter when they figure it'll be busier, and they'll have their estate sale then. And so that makes it a good time to go. That's also true in Arizona and other Sunbelt destinations. Um, Online auctions, of course, if it's hard to get out where you are in the winter because of weather, or you live in an estate sale desert where they don't do that, like in places like a lot of Kentucky and a lot of Indiana, it's all auctions. Well, they may not be having as many auctions in the winter, so online auctions may be the solution. Mary Jo says, I look anywhere and everywhere. I took a trip upstate to visit my sister and I packed 6 boxes of stuff home. Absolutely true. When I travel, I look because you will see different things and have different experiences, and it's just fun to see what's available in different places. Also, because things were distributed differently in the old days. If you look at old catalogs, you'll see things that say prices higher east of the Mississippi or west of the Mississippi if it was made in New York, it costs more to ship across country, so you probably didn't see as much of it in the West as you did in the East, even if it was nationally distributed. And that was true vice versa. So you'll go to certain areas and there'll be pockets of things that maybe you don't see where you live, but you see them in another spot. Oodalali says, I look at Mercari online auctions in my profit pile. Ah, that's smart. See, this is a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. A whole lot of us have been accumulating stuff to sell. And then we go out and we find more. Sometimes just looking down on the floor and going, hey, wait, I have this really good thing here. Maybe that's the thing I should be focusing on, is the stuff I've already got that I kind of forgot and put aside. I think that's really, really smart. Now, in Carol Sue's case, she's selling one category primarily, and it does sell all year long. And so that is a different game, absolutely. Um, let's see, yes, where you are, because you're in Southern California, the seasons are pretty much the same year round. And so it is pretty much a year round business with similar things and big, huge things like the big market at Veterans Stadium in Long Beach that happen all the time. Um, Timing is also part of it in the wintertime for me. I've noticed that a lot of people, if you want to get better deals, for example, or go when there's going to be sales, a lot of antique malls have sales in early December. And why is that? Well, late October and early November are usually slower times. Then there's the big Thanksgiving rush, and then people get really focused on buying gifts. And the problem with gift buying is, unless you know a collector and you know their taste and you know what they have in their collection, a lot of people are afraid to buy for collectors. Well, what if I buy the wrong thing? What if they can't take it back? What if they've already got 6 of them? And so the antique malls oftentimes will have sales between about December 1st and December 10th, because that is a slow time for them, because people are in the regular malls and doing the online stuff for the regular retail. And so you'll see that for the real world stuff, that can be a good time to shop in terms of timing in the wintertime. Particularly also after Christmas, the malls tend to get busier, the antique malls do, because people take their return money and their Christmas money. But what also happens is a lot of people clear out old stuff and donate it. In Canada, they have, in England, they have the tradition of Boxing Day, which historically was, now it's a big sales day and a party day, but historically it was where if you got a bunch of nice things and they were new things, you would box up all your old stuff and then you would go give it to the poor. And a lot of people use that period right after Christmas to do a little bit of a purge. It's like pre-spring cleaning. And so thrift stores, especially church thrift stores, get a lot of donations in that period of time. And so right after the holidays can be a very fertile time to hit some of the thrift stores, because a lot of donations are coming in. So that's another thing in the winter. I also like to look at places where local sellers are local advertising to local clients, where a serious collector might not usually think to look, like local Facebook Marketplace and even Craigslist. Now, Craigslist, it's funny. I'll look at Craigslist and there'll be 50 listings and everything's priced to the moon and they don't know what they've got and they're fly by night. And then there'll be one good listing. I found 2 railroad lanterns for $5 a piece from a woman in Indiana who just wanted to clear out her the back room, and there they were. And I sold them for 50 bucks each. And it was the middle of winter, and she just wanted to get rid of them, and she wasn't sure anyone would come for them. And I saw the ad, and apparently nobody else did. So, um, no, uranium glass does not lose its glow because it is in the material. It is part of the glass because of the way it's formed. So no, you can leave it in the sun and that won't hurt it at all. We're going to talk about glass just a little bit here in a minute too. Um, Another thing you can do in the wintertime is put advertising out yourself on those same things. Just say, we buy antiques and vintage, if you're not finding anything interesting, especially if you're in a more isolated area. And things will just come to you. It is really kind of amazing. Let's see. Another question I was asked was, do you have a favorite honey hole you go back to all the time? Now, of course, I want you to all tell me where your favorite honey holes are, and you're welcome to do that in the chat to the extent that you're willing. A lot of people like to keep these things a secret, I realize. But I'll share a few of mine because I travel so much, there's no way, it's not like I'm not in a place where I can go back to them week after week after week, so I might as well share the wealth. Um, when I think of honey hole, oftentimes I'm thinking in terms of thrift stores or places where you might be able to get something pretty reasonably, where there's consistently a good supply of antiques and vintage, and there's a chance something's going to come up. And that kind of depends where I am. In Seattle, the big Goodwill store on Dearborn Street, it's huge. Everybody goes there. You would think it would be picked over all the time, but they have a boutique that is all about antiques and vintage. And it's such a large store in such a large city. There's always something there to buy. I have never gone out of that place empty-handed. Never, ever, ever. Um, the value villages, which are savers in other parts of the country, and I hear all the time, oh, savers is terrible, savers is terrible. And I haven't been to many of the ones that are called savers, but in our part of the country in the Northwest, they're called value village, and particularly in the Seattle suburbs. Again, I rarely go to a value village and don't find something. And when I was in the last time, another viewer happened to be there, and he had just picked up 3 pieces of sterling that somehow got onto the silver plate shelf and were priced at $2.50 a piece. So I definitely, that's a honey hole for me. Um, whatnot, whatnot is a good thing to mention here. Yes, and whatnot is a honey hole for certain things. Whatnot is a great place to sell if you have a developed market or if you're on a chain with people who have a developed market. Like when Jocelyn used to, on Crazy Lamp Lady, used to sell on Whatnot. Well, you wanted to be right behind her selling glass. Now she has her own site and it's knickknacks, and you want to be right behind her selling glass because you're going to sell well. But a whole lot of people go on to Whatnot. They don't have a following. They're not in a chain. They're just out there and they're just getting rid of stuff. Yvonne Thrifty Rich tells me that she buys stuff on Whatnot cheap all the time and turns around and puts it on eBay and sells it for a profit. And I believe that that's true. I absolutely think that looking at smaller channels on Whatnot, even maybe some smaller YouTube live sales, are places to go. Facebook Live auctions lately. That's interesting. Absolutely. That can definitely be a thing. Corey says the Assistants League, and yes, I keep being invited and I feel badly. I have not been able to go. They have a thrift store in Everett, Washington, and one of our viewers, Susan Lee, keeps saying, please come and visit, and I just haven't been able to, and that is definitely a place that I have found things in the past. PJ, hi there. I'm glad to have you here. I end up overpaying when I bid on live auctions. This is a very interesting thing to talk about for a moment, too. I found a long time ago, I do better with auctions like if I go to an auction, if they'll let me leave a bid, I do better than if I sit there and actually bid on the stuff. Because when I'm sitting there bidding on this stuff, something comes up and I haven't looked at it and I'm like, oh, I missed that. Oh, I'm going to bid on it. It almost always has damage. If it's a live auction and I don't have a number in mind when the bidding starts, I start to get auction fever just like everyone else. So for me, I have to go. It's kind of like people who go to gamble in Vegas. You bring a certain amount of money and when it's gone, you're done, or you go crazy and then you have to sell your car to get home. And so for me, yeah, I need to have a limit in mind before I go into that kind of an auction, or it's easy to get in trouble. The glass encyclopedia worked. Oh, good. That's great. I'm so glad. That's excellent. I feel like that's a really good site, and I'm glad that worked for you. Um, Leaving a bid is less emotional and we don't overpay. For some people, the thrill of being there and in it is part of what they're paying for. And if that's your thing, it's fine and it's okay. Just remember, part of that excitement is what you paid for, and maybe you paid a little more to have the excitement. Or maybe you get a bargain because no one bids and you throw up your card at the last minute. So it can work both ways, but yes. We can go tomorrow. Well, I have an appointment tomorrow, but maybe we can go soon. I like that idea. In Spokane, Washington, the South Hill Goodwill seems to be very good. I've done well at estate sales there. Estate sales are kind of an easy thing to say, but in Portland, Oregon, the Goodwills are good. That's why Laura Caldwell does so well with the Goodwills. It goes to them a lot because they tend to get good donations. Portland's a great vintage town. There's just a lot of stuff there. It's a little older than the other Northwest cities, and so there's old houses that have old stuff, and it comes up. The estate sales in Portland that I've gone to have been great. The prices have been reasonable, and I found cool stuff. When I'm in Kentucky, on the other hand, they have very few estate sales. So certain vendor malls are good. Um, my local auction house in Dawson Springs, Cotton's Auction, he specializes in antiques and vintage. He doesn't just do that, but he always has something, and I always come out of there with a few things that are priced pretty well. So that's a honey hole for me when I'm there. Um, Yes, the discount days are great. My MO with estate sales, a lot of people say I don't go the first day because it's so high priced. I do. I go the first day, I check out the prices, I buy the things that I think are priced well for what they are, especially if they're more unusual because they're not going to last a half off day. And then I make a mental note of what would I buy if it was half off? Or, ooh, how cheap would that suddenly be? Maybe it doesn't interest me at $30, but at $15, I'd buy all of them. And I go back, and a lot of times I get all of them. So, is there a boy? There used to be more honey holes for this. It's such a big part of the market. The market is so, this is peak time for Starburst and Atomic Vintage. It's hard to find a honey hole. Once in a while, you'll find where I have found that cheap is in unlikely places. Like you're in California, so in an urban part of California, so a lot of people are onto that there. But I have found pieces when you go out into the Inland Empire, um, Pomona, Ontario, San Bernardino. I find pieces out there sometimes at estate sales or shops that are a little more overlooked because it's not as much a part of that culture as the more coastal part of LA. So for where you are, that might be a suggestion. Another place that I like in your area is the Santa Barbara Goodwill. I hope they still do it. I haven't been there in years, but they had a Goodwill that had a boutique. And the boutique, because it was Santa Barbara, had great stuff in it. My aunt works at, well, she's 90 now. She only works there on occasion, but she works for a shop in Ridgefield, Connecticut, another area that's a wealthy enclave outside of a major city. They have great stuff in that thrift store all the time, and it's priced at thrift store prices because that's just the caliber of stuff that's there, and that's what people are donating. And for some very wealthy people, one thing to remember is that you you are in a place where to them the donation might be more valuable to them for their tax purposes than trying to sell the thing and make the money themselves. So you'll find things in the thrift stores there. Conversely, this is going to sound really crazy, trailer court sales have been really good for me as honey holes because a lot of people who move to trailer courts are actually, a lot of people just think, oh, that's poor. Oh, no one had any money. Well, that's not always true. A lot of times it's retirees. They just want a simpler life. They want to sell their big house, live in a cheaper place, pocket the difference, live off of that, have a nice retirement, and they bring their best stuff with them. I have found good stuff at trailer park sales. I had to go the last day because it started and went full time, went a couple hours, and they had a kitchen full of postcards. If you go the last couple of hours of an estate sale, you're going to get things really inexpensively usually. Now, once in a while, you'll have someone say, oh, well, we're just going to hold that over, or oh, well, I have someone who comes in at the end and buys everything. And I'll tell you honestly, if you're standing there with money in your hand and you're willing to buy it, and they're not selling it to you, that means they're probably buying out the estate sale. So that's a clue right there. If I have someone who comes in towards the end of an estate sale and they want a whole category of something and they offer me a decent price, they are the one who gets to buy it, and my person who comes out at the end gets what's left. So yes, that's also true. Trailer parks in some places are not like trailer parks in other places. But I have to say, I went into one in Oregon that looked really super scroungy and bought one of the best pieces of pottery craft I've ever owned just because it somehow ended up there. I went to a flea market in Okeechobee, Florida, which is a very poor part of Florida. And I was with a friend of mine, and he bought a little metal box that was from the 1700s that was worth $300, and he got it for $5. So, you just never know where things lurk. But yes, generally speaking, some things are more than others. There is a lot of atomic and starburst at Springfield, and some of it goes cheaper. You're right, the Springfield, Ohio show, definitely. On the other hand, Palm Springs, yes, that would be a place to go, and for your kind of thing too. Trailer parks and mobile home communities, yes, that is true. It's not just semantics, it's also where I'm staying right now with my friend is a 55 and over park with a golf course, and it's nicer than most houses I've lived in. So, um, okay, let's see here. Oh, another place too, really quickly. Small shows and flea markets off the beaten path. I have bought pretty nice things at Teak Stock. Teak Stock isn't a big antique show. It's a nice gathering of fun folks who get together and have a good time. And it's very devoted, and the people who come are really serious about their categories and they spend well on those. But there's a lot of really cool stuff that just sort of floats through there that isn't really, it's not as glass oriented. It's not the categories that everybody is looking for who comes there. And because it's a small show still, it hasn't developed enough of a local market yet that a lot of other people are coming in as dealers and buying other things for resale that are appearing there. And I do well there. I stumbled across a little flea market in Lyons, Nebraska, about 40 miles off the freeway. There were two people selling decent antique and vintage things, and boy, were they thirsty when I came up to the booth because they hadn't gotten anybody looking for their stuff. Everything else was new junk and, I mean, just, random stuff that people bring to local flea markets. And the two people who had antiques and vintage could not have been happier to deal with me because I was the one guy who came who was into that stuff. So, and yes, teak stock is a fun time. I'm looking forward to the next one. Um, okay, let's see. One other question that we had is Matt Aaron Walker, who I don't think is in the chat tonight, but I think he'll get to replay this, so I do want to answer his question. Said, what are some of your favorite things to collect or favorite finds of all time? And I won't go too far into that because that could be a whole topic in and of itself, but I'll show you a couple of things. Let's get back to overlays here. One of my best buys of all time, and I was tempted to keep it, and now that I look at it again, I still kind of wish I had kept it, is this piece. It was known at its time as Aphrodite in the Clouds. It's also called the Blue Nude. This is Edward Curtis. Edward Curtis and his brother Ashel were primarily known for taking pictures of Native Americans and Western scenes, and they were early photographers in the 1900 to 1920s era, art photographers. They were very good at what they did. I went to an estate sale here in Seattle years ago in a part of town that's now completely renovated, but the house had been built in 1909. They had turned off the electricity, and so it was a dark gray day. We couldn't really see anything. They had everything piled up. They had piles of pictures, and I'm going through and I saw this one and I thought, oh, that's nice. And I couldn't really see it well. I didn't really know what it was. So I put it in this pile and they said 20 bucks a piece for all the prints. So I just bought all of them. I got it out. I didn't even look at it for a couple of weeks. By the time I looked at it and realized what it was, I would have gone back and given them more money, but they'd sold the house and it was being renovated and they were gone. And so it was mine, and I took it to somebody and said, is this something interesting? And he said, why, yes, I happen to deal in this sort of thing. And he helped me arrange a sale to a collector in California who paid $2,500 for it, which is why I didn't keep it. I miss it. I have to admit, the one thing, he did was he superimposed two negatives together. And so this is a woman laying on her back, and then he took a picture of clouds and then printed it in blue albumin print together and made it into one picture, which is a trick, and especially back in the 19-teens when he did this. And he did a very limited series of these, and they're worth a bunch of money now. Will I ever find one for $20 again? I can't count on that. And part of me wishes I had kept it, but she looked a little dead to me too, and that was a little weird. So I decided to let it go. However, I did think it was alluring. And yes, exactly. It looks like waves at first. It's a little bit surrealistic, and I have to admit I love surrealism. So Southeast Asia, real quickly about Southeast Asia, I find very interesting the fragments and remnants of things that are maybe 150 or 200 years old, stone heads off of statues. There's a lot of really interesting, intricate metal work that had to do with various gods and goddesses there that you'll see. And you'll get a feel for what's older because you'll see a whole bunch of stuff that looks cheaply like it in flea markets. It's all bright and shiny. And then if you go into a real antique store, you start to see, your eye will start to adjust to the things that are older. And I find those things really interesting in Southeast Asia. And yes, it is super goth in a really great way, actually. I just thought she was really great. A couple of other things. Well, I wore this shirt tonight because I'm in Seattle, and because I travel so much, some of my cool stuff's in Kentucky, some of it's in Florida, some of it's here, and I thought, well, I'll just show a few things that I like that are here. This shirt, my friend got it for me in a thrift store in about 1990. So now it's vintage. I've just kept it ever since. I just really like it. It's got the big wide lapels and lots of design, and it's a little big and blousy like shirts were back then. And so now it's vintage and retro. If you keep your stuff long enough, it all becomes that. And then it comes back in style again. And then it goes out of style again. So make your own style. um, Behind me, a groovy red lava lamp, and this is the 1960s one with the pinholes in the base. That's a little hard for you to see there, but that's something that I really like that I think I picked up for $15 or $20, and it reminded me of the ones I saw when I was 6 years old, and we'd walk into the Navy Exchange, and they had a whole display of them right there in the front, along with the stereos that had the colors that would play in the speakers when you played. Boy, we should have gotten one of those. I just got a bucking Bronco brooch for two and put it on eBay for 75. That's great. Oh, and you got to go to a hoarded house. I love hoarded houses are great to pick. They're so much fun. And scarves and fabric are something I'm picking up too. I think you're onto something there. I just sold a whole bunch. Everything, a bunch of Vera, a bunch of stuff that was clearly 70s patterns. And yes, history repeats itself. If I saw it at a thrift store, you'd pick it up for eBay. Yeah, well, and I know you're doing a lot with clothes now. In fact, this is going to be on my, this is a little preview. This is actually going to be on my next eBay flight because I just think it's so funny. And I'll put it on, but it is clearly a woman. This is like Pat Benatar in Love is a Battlefield, but how's this for 80s? That just made me smile. So that was a thrift store find. It's a little musty. If you have any thoughts about how I can make it smell like it wasn't sitting in a closet. It smells like leather that's been in a closet a long time, but it's North Beach, which I think was, a hot California label back in the day. So let's see. Yeah, shopping at the Base Exchange, absolutely. Oh, I'd love to go. I hope you have a lot of fun, and I think that would be great. I hope you do well there. Throw it in a bag with dryer sheets. Okay, thank you. Very good. I'll do that. Um, some other things real quickly that I like to collect. I won't go on too long because we have one other topic I want to talk about a little bit. But I am a coin collector. This isn't my very favorite American gold piece design, but it's one that I had here that I can show you. I'm usually a silver guy, but gold, of course, has a lot of value right now, and I like gold in American coins because gold was very hard, so they generally are not worn, and you really see the detail. This is from the 1850s. It's called a coronet or liberty head, and on the back it has this eagle with the wings up. We're approaching the Civil War at this time, and so the eagle is very dramatic and looks like it's ready to fight, and turned out it was. This one is also activated charcoal. Very good. Hi, Critter Girl, by the way. This is something that I had heard about on the show Blackadder. They would always refer to, oh, I want a crown for that. I didn't know what a crown was. Well, I finally found a crown. This is a silver coin from England. What I like about coins is how sculptural they are, and a sculptor had to make every single coin you ever see. And so somebody had to do a miniature sculpture of this so that they could turn it into a die. And on the other side is King George V. And this was actually the last year of his reign, he died in 1936. He actually was euthanized, which was a big secret in the royal family that came out a couple of years ago and was considered rather disgraceful. Um, a couple other things really quickly. Some of my favorite things lately have been things people have been giving to me. I was at the Portland show and a guy came up, and I'm going to read his name, um, Carter Jennings, and he said that he had one of his family members was Donna Jennings, who worked for McCoy as a potter, and Milton Jennings and Carl joining. Carl Jennings was a blacksmith in his family, and he had another potter in the family. And he gave me this, and I just loved the glaze. I had never actually kept for myself a piece of West German pottery before. And there it is, and I just think it's really, really sweet, and it's perfect to put pencils and pens in. And so, it's sometimes the things that I really enjoy are the things I just got, and especially when they have some additional meaning because they're connected to somebody who I got them from. Another friend gave me this. This is Manna. Manna was the crazy potter in Arizona who also ran the peyote church, and you can tell by the designs. But I've never owned a piece myself. I've bought and sold them, and someone gave me this one because they saw that I had sold one, and I said, gee, they're so funky and weird and fun. And they said, well, you should have one to keep, and now I do. So that's really just fun stuff. Someone else gave me this. I think someone here in the chat, actually. And this is because they saw me put a piece on my eBay sale, and they said, oh, well, since you like that, I just happened to find one. This is Cloud's Folsom stoneware from the 1990s, made in the Sacramento area. And what an interesting and fun piece. And so I just am amassing this nice little collection of things that have meaning to me because they came from people who I've gotten to know through YouTube, and it's just so cool to have these new memories around to go with old nostalgic things. Another thing that came to me, this is from Naomi, who did the show with me in Portland, and she gave me this. We went to the St. Augustine Alligator and Ostrich Farm when I was a little kid, and I had not thought of it in years. And she said, oh, I just have some Florida postcards you might be able to sell. And I saw this one and said, oh, no, I got to keep that one. So it's just fun for that. Let's see. And then real quickly, a couple of other things. This one, I like Hull Ebb Tide. I had not seen the piece with the mermaid before, and somebody gave me this and said, we know you like this, and I didn't have any in my collection, so now I do. And then one other thing, this is a nostalgia piece. It's just an ornament. I will tell you a little secret between us and well, just us and us. Jocelyn at Crazy Lamp Lady is starting to get really interested in glass ornaments and orbs, and she is a market maker, so I would look for glass ornaments and orbs if you see them. This one is from the original Mount St. Helens glass factory, and it belonged to my aunt and was given to me recently as a keepsake from her. So, sometimes some of the favorite things I have are not necessarily the big, expensive things. It's stuff that just has meaning. And I think that's a lot of what gets us collecting. So, and yes, that's right, Mount St. Helens. Yeah, the fellow in Centralia, Washington, who had the patent for Mount St. Helens blew that particular piece. We actually watched him make it together when my aunt came to visit back in 1990. So it's just it's cool that it's stuck in the family. And it's worth $15 or $20 or $25, but it's really about the memory. So those are some of my favorite things lately. And then with that, Carol Sue, I wanted to make sure we got to this. Carol Sue asked my opinions, since we're talking about glass pieces. What are your opinions on hand painting on vintage clear and colored glass pieces? And I have some opinions about that. I did oh yeah, look for the original Mount St. Helens ash glass. He was the one who had the patent. If you buy Glass Eye Studio, they made great stuff. A lot of the early pieces had Mount St. Helens glass. A lot of the later pieces were offshore. Make sure you look at your labels. Okay, so hand painting of glass. So I did a video a couple of years ago and talked about, I introduced a couple of, it was when we were in Marietta, Ohio, and we talked to Trudy Mendenhall and Linda Fleming, who both were former Fenton glass artists, and they are working with Rosie's Auction House because they paint on, they're sourcing Fenton pieces for them, and those two women in particular are continuing to paint on Fenton glass. It caused a little bit of controversy that they were doing it with some collectors because they said, well, they shouldn't be taking the old pieces and painting new stuff on it. My opinion on it after talking to both of them and interviewing them was that, first of all, they know how to do it. The first thing, if you want it to adhere and stay on the glass, is you have to treat the glass, because once the glass is annealed, it has a coating on it. And if you don't take that coating off, which you do with a chemical process or a buffing process, the paint that you paint on will be there until it flakes off. It won't adhere to the glass properly, and it can't be fired again. And so if you don't do it properly, it won't last. So that's number one about painting on old glass. The second thing is they both were very clear that they are not painting the same exact patterns that they did when they worked for Fenton. And they're signing it with today's date. So they are not attempting to mislead people into thinking that, oh, this is an old Charlton decorated piece because that's popular with collectors, so let's make more of that. Also, if you look at the finish, you'll see the finish has been disturbed somewhat in order to do that. Because they're doing all of those things, I don't personally have a problem with it, especially because they are not using rare Fenton blanks. Fenton was a very good company that was in business a long time, and there are certain things they made a ton of. They made a ton of Silvercrest milk glass with white rims. They made a ton of certain things. I'm not sure if I can find this picture really quickly, but I'll show you something out of, I was sent these today from an estate in Florida, and it was not a particularly interesting estate. I'll see if I can find it. I might have to run through a few pictures really quick. Okay, I think it might be the top one here. There we go. Look at all that cobalt glass on the top shelf. Cobalt's becoming popular again. They're all bottles and vases. A lot of them were made by Libby. A lot of them were made in the 1980s. Are they vintage? Yes. Are they a pretty color? Yes. Do they look good in a window? Yes. Are they valuable? No. Are they going to be really collectible someday and we'll wish we hadn't altered them? Well, probably not, because they made thousands and thousands and thousands of each of these shapes. These are all very common. We're not going to miss a few if somebody paints on them. It's not going to destroy the market, and it's not going to make people misled into thinking that it's something other than what they bargained for. And so, in my mind, that's the kind of thing that you want to pick up and paint on if you're going to do. We'll talk another time about things that are vintage but are not necessarily great just because they're vintage. Well, there's a lot of glass that is vintage because it's 40 years old, but it ain't necessarily nothing because it's common stuff that they made a ton of. There's tons of green, forest green floral vases that say Brody on the bottom, made in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1950s, that were sold through every florist shop. And I know Elderly Poodle and a couple of other, Corinne Jones, both were florists. I'm sure they have seen a jillion of these. The world is not going to be a worse place if somebody paints on those things. On the other hand, exactly, this is how I feel about it too. And yes, they are dating the paintings. They're dating the new paintings on the older Fenton with the new dates so that you will not be confused. And that to me is the big difference. And so that is the reason I feel okay about this. On the other hand, if it is a scarcer item, if it's a hand-blown item that was made by hand and is a one-of-a-kind piece, if it's unique in some way, painting for restoration, if there already was a painted design, is one thing. but painting a new design on an old handmade piece of glass, to me, there's the question of, are you taking away from the integrity and the design and the desire of the artist who made it originally? And I think that that's where you start to cross the line into what to me is not acceptable. I don't want to see people doing designs that are embellishing another artist's work. If it's already painted and they did it the way they wanted to, respect that. Would you take a Picasso painting and start painting more stuff on it because you thought it would look better if the woman had a mustache, because it'd be more surrealistic? Well, no, you probably wouldn't do that, and I don't really think that that should be done on glass pieces either. And you asked because you do watercolor and acrylic. I would stick to vintage is fine, actually, Carol Sue, in my opinion. I mean, there's a ton of plain patterns that are really good quality by Heisey glass, for example, like Heisey Crystallite. It's beautiful stuff. It's well made, but they made lots and lots and lots of it, and it's not selling for much right now. Imperial Candlewick with all those nice little dots around the rim, those big flat plates might be a great thing to paint a scene on. And again, they made thousands and thousands and thousands of those. You're not destroying the market and taking the only one out of the market so nobody else can have it. To me, it's kind of the same thing with, like, do you paint a piece of furniture? Well, if it's mass produced and they did a whole lot of them, especially if it's a little scarred up and it already needs some help, if a piece of glass has a bunch of scratches on it and you can just paint over it and make it look better, do it. If it's something where it's a period piece that was handmade and has a finish that was done by hand and can't be replicated, don't do it. So to me, that's my rule. Because yes, authentic is what we want. I see artists who paint animals and other subjects on old postcards, and it's really cool looking, and I've seen that too, and it can be really great or really funny. They'll add some element. Old postcards mostly were made by the thousands, if not the millions, so that's not going to really destroy the market. On the other hand, if it's a rare real photo postcard of something and there might only be one image of that thing that exists, don't do it. So I think just use your your thought of that. And yes, they do have to fire on the new paint if they want it to adhere. Now you can cold paint, but it will wear off eventually unless you just sit it there and look at it. And even then it can just flake off in a window. And that gets us to one other thing about alterations. Old glass made with manganese, which for elegant depression glass was used up until the 1940s, but most common glass took it out during World War I because manganese was used in war production. If it has manganese, it will turn purple in the sun. Later glass turns a sickly yellow color that nobody is really fond of, but some people love collecting glass that's turned lavender because it's sat in a window for a long time. Now, the purist collector is going to say, well, no, that's sick glass. That's something wrong with it. It wasn't made that way. That was a clarifying agent to make it clear, and now it's turned purple. But if you like that, and it's already happening, go ahead, leave it in the window. I really personally object to when they take an old piece of glass that hasn't turned lavender and they irradiate it, and all of a sudden you have this piece that was supposed to be clear that's 120 years old and it is deep purple. It's pretty, but it's not real, and it's not the way it was made. And I just don't like that. I don't think that kind of alteration. It's just like irradiated gemstones. You hear all this stuff about, oh, synthetic diamonds, and you can buy this great synthetic diamond for your engagement ring, and they're all appealing to like 20 and 30-year-old guys buying an engagement ring or a diamond ring because, oh, it's cheaper, it's cheaper. Well, it's also a piece of junk. It's not good. Real is better. So that's my general feeling about alterations in general. Real is better if it is something that is unique, handmade, can't be replicated, has value as old. If it's something that's common and there's a whole lot of them, then embellishing them may be a fun thing, and it may be the thing that makes that piece last, because I'll be honest with you, not too many people care about candlewick salad plates anymore if they don't already have 20 in their stack with their set. They're probably not going to pay more than $3 or $4 or $5 at a thrift store for one. if you can make it into something fun and pretty and nice that somebody will really enjoy, you're adding value and you're adding interest and you're going to preserve that piece. So to me, it's also about preservation. Um, Also a good point, yes. Faded pastel farm prints, very common. You want to embellish them and paint over them with something interesting that gives them new life. I think that's fine because there's probably 100 others of that same print sitting in that same general vicinity. Um, if it's factory print work, if it's common, I don't think it's a problem. I saw one turned into a clown. Now I want to know what that was. Okay, I have to admit I love this idea, and this is another example. The first 31 precious moments are kind of precious. They're harder to find. Some of the big pieces, the nativity scenes, are hard to find. A whole lot of precious moments are sitting in thrift stores for $2 and $3, and nobody is buying them. There's just scads of them. And I love the idea of turning them into zombies. It's so antithetical to what they were about in the first place. And I have to admit, it just makes me laugh. And now I want one. So that might be that might be the thing to look for as far as that goes. Um, yes, there you go. That's right. Yep, Dagny at Flying Pig does do that sort of thing. I'm going to leave you with one thing. I was going to talk a little more about this, and I think we're kind of going long here, so I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly here. Hang on a second. But we'll talk a little more about this next time and any other subjects that you would like to talk about next time. Again, please email me. This is always fun. I always have the most fun when this is driven by you and you have ideas of things that are of interest to you. So please keep them coming. But I had an interesting talk briefly with Corinne earlier, and she said, I am going to keep looking for things that have been handcrafted in some way. Jewelry, art glass, pottery, vintage things that they can't afford to remake. And I just want to leave you with that to chew on a little bit. As a collector or as a reseller, whatever you may be, I think there is some real genius in that. Corinne is in a situation, I hope I'm not oversharing here, but um, she's been helping her mother who's in her dotage. Her mother had a house full of all sorts of things. When we were at Spokane, she brought a box and said, look, here's all this stuff. I just don't know whether it's even worth keeping or not. And we divided it into keep, donate, toss. And she's looking at in the future as I evolve from selling these things to becoming a reseller in my own right, where do I want to focus? And I have to say, I really think that she's on the right track because there's a whole lot of things that are very, very common that are vintage. And I'm just going to show you one picture and then we'll talk about this more later. But I got a bunch of pictures sent to me today by an organizer in Florida. Can you please help us sell this stuff? And I have to say, the answer I told her was, I'm sorry, but no, I can't, and I don't know that you'll find anyone else who can. Let me turn this one off. Because it was case after case of things that looked like, let's see here. Let me get one that you can see a little more closely. And that's actually a bad example because I see things in there that are decent. Bear with me, I'll get to it. Okay, here's an example. There was a whole lot of this. I see one Fenton piece in milk glass. I see a whole bunch of Anchor Hawking white milk glass that just doesn't sell even though it's 60 years old. They made a ton of it. It's a weak color in milk glass. It's not a deep, rich, milky color. It's thin like skim milk or that Sanilac that you would mix up that was fake milk. The napkin rings, yeah, they're 40 years old. They're vintage, technically. But does anyone really want them? Is this really what people are collecting? All of this stuff is old enough to be vintage, but is it desirable? And I'm going to leave you with that thought because I think that's something that I'd like to explore more with you. I see a whole lot of places in antique stores nowadays that look like, let me get to one of those. I see a lot of people who are doing stuff that looks like maybe looks like, well, that's at least colorful. Maybe looks like this. It's a look. It's a look that we see in magazines. It's fake flowers. It's white ironstone. Nothing remarkable. No big serving pieces. A couple of sort of crooked candles. Is the stuff vintage? Yeah, it's vintage. Is there anything to it? What is collectible about it? What is special about it? And so I would challenge all of you in your collecting and your reselling to, give thought to scholarship. I mean, I think one thing that as I've been doing this for a number of years now, my outreach, so much of it honestly is about trying to help people understand maybe these things that I talk about sometimes are not as collectible as they used to be, but I want to talk about why somebody thinks they're special and what it is that they have going for them that makes them different from something like the generic stuff that we just saw. And that's because I think that as time goes on, the things that people are going to value, it's not just going to be about the look. It's going to be, it has a look and it's an interesting piece in and of its own right. Um, and I think you're right. Paint flowers on those pieces of milk glass. Exactly. And yes, I am definitely an advocate for the vintage. And it's not necessarily about the look. And honestly, it's not necessarily about, oh, it's trending hot or it's not. We can look up trends. We know that depression glass is not as hot as it used to be, but it's still cool. And we still got good information about it. And there's some really neat factors to it and interesting things. Modern farmhouse, the scourge, yes. Well, again, to me, modern farmhouse could be done with real primitives and interesting English ironstone. You could have that same look, and all of those pieces could be really something special in and of themselves and worth collecting. But I didn't see anything in that picture that was anything other than I saw something that looked like this in a magazine, and I'm going to go buy things that are cheap that look sort of like this and make a display. I just don't know who that customer is in the long run. I I don't see where that creates some sort of loyalty or attraction to seriously preserving the past and the kind of stuff that I like to do. So, and yes, there are stories behind collectibles. And yes, please, real primitives. And that's the other problem is that pretty soon, if you're just doing generic, well, then you can just go and buy it at Hobby Lobby. And so can everybody else. And then you end up with what my niece talks about, where she's in her mid 30s and she's like, I'm so sick of going into my friends' houses and they have the same boring stuff that I do. I want something different. And that's when people start collecting. So, and this is the big problem is people don't know the difference. So please help me be our ambassadors and link these folks that, if someone comes into your house or your office or wherever you have your stuff and says, oh, that's really cool, take a moment and explain to them why and what appeals to you about it. This is how we get more people interested in this that help us preserve this instead of bringing oodles and oodles of more stuff made in China that looks sort of like it over. I just don't get it. So anyhow, with all that, I am open to any questions you have, and then I'm going to wrap up here for this month. And I will do an outro, and you're welcome to. I'll keep chatting with you in that if you have anything else that you want to talk about. Please do. It's been such a pleasure to share time with you again. I always really enjoy doing this. It makes me think a little bit about what's happening and what's interesting, and it really helps when you have things that you'd like to talk about. So this made this really fun, and I will look forward to seeing you again soon. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the outro, but I'll be here in the chat. And oh, well, real quickly, let's answer this one. Yes, do I know if, yes, Murano did, there are Murano lamp bases, absolutely. And some were made as lamp bases, some were bases that were converted. Usually you can tell that because they flare out at the top and they have a metal cap that covered what was the vase opening. But a lot were made directly, and you'll see like they come up to a point and then the wiring was fed in, and it was done that way deliberately. A lot of the Murano glass bases I see have a lot of gold in them, so that can be a clue. Recycle with the good stuff. I agree. Yeah, unfortunately, IKEA made some great stuff early in their, and I don't hate all IKEA. I think they make some fun things, but yeah, a lot of it is just, as Sarah said, modern crap with no character. And we have a lot of that in the world, and we don't really need any more. So let's keep doing the vintage, folks. All right, well, I appreciate all of your time too. I'm going to hit the outro here, but we'll just keep chatting in the chat, and I'll see you all soon.